Welcome back to the Global Business Report here on Arise News. I'm Idia ICN, coming to you this morning from Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. Now, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has again assured the Nigerian public that the ugly experience witnessed last year during the Christmas and New Year festivities due to scarcity of petroleum products will not happen again this year. The managing director of NNPC, Dr. Mike Kanti Baru, made the pledge at the just concluded Lagos International Trade Fair. Barrow disclosed that the corporation was working hard to ensure it has more than enough fuel to serve Nigerians during the period. He noted that the NNPC had in the last couple of years engaged itself in the transformation of its entities to make the corporation competitive, stressing that the corporation sought to continue creating values by increasing its competitiveness in the global marketplace. Earlier in the week, the International Monetary Fund painted the precarious situation of the nation's economy in particular and sub-Saharan Africa's in general, going by how much the country and the region spend on debt servicing. According to the Bretton Woods financial institution, Nigeria spends more than 50% of its revenues on servicing debts, a situation that does not give room for other necessary expenses. Speaking at a presentation of the Regional Economic Outlook for Sub-Saharan Africa, Capital Flows and the Future of Work in Abuja, Senior Resident Representative and Mission Chief for Nigeria African Department, Amin Mati, put Nigeria's growth rate for 2018 at 1.9%. Joining me to discuss this is financial analyst Chris Da-Silva. Good morning, Mr. Chris, and welcome to the Global Business Report.
Good morning.
Okay, so beyond excessive borrowing, how can the government be more creative in funding its programs?
Okay, let me start by saying that debt in itself, whether sourced locally or foreign, is used by policymakers to tweak economic issues in the economy.
Of course.
In itself, debt itself is not a bad thing. It's just the fact that what do you do with the sourced funds? That is very important here. In case of Nigeria, we've had issues that has to do with corruption. We've had issues that had to do with improper utilization of these funds. And we keep borrowing. So the issue now is not the debt. Just like every other human being, even businesses, you borrow.
It's how it's being allocated.
You borrow. Once you see a gap for the country, once you see a gap between your savings and investment, you borrow to address those gaps. But the issue is, how do you now manage the repayment of the loan?
Of course.
Which is very important. So for an economy, we need to start looking at, yes, the government have been talking about diversifying the economy, but seriously, the government needs to start doing a lot more in that aspect, you know. You need more revenue. We need to generate more revenue.
Of course.
That is very important, because if we don't, we have to keep borrowing to meet up with those economic goals that the government has set from government in, government out, here in, here out. So it's important that we start looking at those revenue areas. Last couple of months ago, last year, the government talked about trying to bring a lot of people into the tax net via the VAIDS, the VATs. And to a large extent, if you compare with what they've done with previous government, they've done a good job in that regard. So government needs to do more. Okay. Agricultural policies, we need to really focus more on that.
Hone in on that.
Yes. It's not time for lip service, but we really need to. Yes, they're trying a lot of intervention funds here and there, but the masses have just started feeling the effect of this.
Exactly.
It's important we begin to feel the effect. And again, apart from just, we should start looking at the business end of the agriculture, not just for us to feed here, but we need to start thinking of exporting. Yeah. When we export, we get foreign currencies in.
Exactly.
That way we can deal with our investment. We do not go and borrow and start paying salaries. Exactly. You go and borrow, start paying salaries for consumption basis. You need to borrow and work on investment. Put the money in so that the money can generate other funds.
Okay, so I want to ask about diversification really quickly, because it's been our favorite song for a very long time now. What do you think are the impediments to diversifying the Nigerian economy? Because we've also been talking about agriculture. But what else? What other ways can we diversify the Nigerian economy?
Okay, just like I said, well, we cannot overflog it.
Of course.
Agriculture is very important because we have a mono economy. Now, we've looked at the issue of tax. Taxation in Nigeria, it's a massive area that the government can actually tap into. If you look at the figures that were being put together when we started talking about bringing almost everybody, almost all big companies that are not out there, outside this tax net, within the tax net, the kind of revenue some countries abroad, they do borrow, like Japan, but their external reserve is quite huge. Exactly. Countries like United Kingdom, they run the economy based on tax. So we could look at the issue of tax. Then the states stop depending on government for the monthly allocations. They need to start doing things within their states to generate internal revenue. It's important.
Okay, well, proper taxation can obviously be used to effectively regulate macroeconomic issues in any economy. Now, in Nigeria, how exactly can it be used to stimulate the Nigerian economy? And I also want to ask you about the multiple levels of taxation, because you see businesses being taxed at a federal, state, and local level. So they end up, the cost of taxation on businesses is quite high.
Okay, yes. If you look at that's another issue we have in here, in the sense that you have a company, like for instance, a company that's into hospitality business. You have up to 14, 15 various kinds of taxes that this.
Exactly.
So where are you going to make the profit? You give room for people to not want to pay tax.
Exactly.
But by the time you pull it, let it be defined. Those few areas. This is what you're paying for, this is what you're paying for. And between the state and the federal, there's proper agreement on what to tax the people on. You see more people willing to pay. So chances of people not wanting to pay the tax, either avoiding it or evading it, is reduced. Okay,
but I want to, before we come back to taxation and businesses, I want to just talk about this Euro bond, right? Okay. So what do you think What do you think the positives were for the last Euro bond that we took? Because now, of course, Buhari has requested another 2.786 billion Euro bond. What do you think was the benefit of the last Euro bond?
Okay, for the Euro bond, it's just another way of increasing our debt profile.
Okay.
Sincerely speaking, if you keep collecting this, increasing this debt, and you are not using it appropriately, we will not. On paper, you can put all the numbers down and say this is what you have achieved. But as it translated into the life of a common man on the street, once that has not been achieved, you've not achieved anything. That's where I see it. The Euro bond, fine, is another way, but like I said, it is not just you asking, whether locally or externally, for debt. But when that debt comes, do you actually even need the debt? Very important. Like when I started, I said, it is not different from what you and I will do in our various businesses or in our life. When you have a salary, if there is a difference,
if you're not using the debt to generate income that you use to pay back the debt, then
there's an
you're just going to plunge into more trouble.
So what is the essence of a debt that you've gone into and your standard of living has not improved?
Absolutely. Well, there's one other issue, because when we're talking about multiple levels of taxation, for instance, we can also look at this debt, right? How do we harmonize all the debt that we're collecting individually for different states? Because we don't borrow and say, okay, we're going to take this amount of money and it's going to be divided for X, Y, and Z purpose. Instead, we collect this for one state, collect this for another state. So how do we harmonize all these funds that we are borrowing now in Nigeria?
I guess the Debt Management Office has that tax in itself to do. And just like I also said earlier, the borrowing itself is not the issue.
Yeah.
You understand? It's not an issue. To borrow is not an issue. Once there is the willingness and the ability to utilize these funds properly, states will always borrow. Once the federal government is carried along, they will always borrow. But when you borrow, what do you do with this? For Nigeria, why do we keep borrowing? It's another issue we need to ask ourselves. Why do we keep borrowing? If we keep borrowing and it's not matching up The gap between our savings and our investment is
immeasurable.
So why do we keep borrowing? We keep borrowing, we want to provide X, Y, Z, and people are not feeling it.
And there's not a lot to show for it. I think that's actually the huge issue. But now let's talk about businesses, because we always, another favorite song that we always hear from the government is how the private sector has this and that role to play. But the cost of doing business in Nigeria is so high, and it's also very discouraging. So how do we create a system that is not disincentive to doing business?
Well, doing business in Nigeria, it's a little bit, I must agree with you, it's tough.
Of course.
And these all economic issues are quite intertwined. Businesses in Nigeria, you need to do business in Nigeria, we need the CBN to take a critical look at the interest rates the banks are offering. The higher the interest rate, borrowing becomes more expensive, the cost of production becomes more expensive, inflation kicks in, people will not be able to afford these things. And if they don't afford these things, if they cannot afford these goods and services, issues, the buying power of the people is eroded. So these are the issues on ground.
Okay, so whenever I ask questions, I always like to take examples from other nations and what they're doing. Now, you see that in countries like the UK, additional taxation is being created to hold companies accountable, particularly in the tech sector, where they're adding tax, because those tech giants were not paying enough taxes. And now that taxation is going to be used to improve the economy. What can emerging economies like Nigeria learn from this? Well,
there's a lot to learn from it. But before we start talking about learning from it, you want to go back again. The one we've done, have we done it well?
Exactly.
All the ones we've collected, have we seen the impact? If you want to ask people, it's just that the way we do things down here, it's a little bit different. You've collected XYZ tax from people. People should be able to ask the government.
Where do our taxes go?
Even before asking, you should be able to tell people, this is what we use this money for. Nobody's going to give you any, but to increase, you're not going to get good feels from the people if you decide to increase again. But that's over true. There, you can monitor, you can see growth, you can see what these things are used for. And when people are asking for additional tax, people will be able to say, okay, this is what they want to use it for. There will be constructive discussion on the way forward. In Nigeria, we just find a situation whereby the federal government is collecting VAT at 5%. The Lagos State government is collecting consumption tax at 5%. The same thing.
So you're saying that rather than imitate, we first need to create a system of accountability for what we already have on our table.
Beautiful. That's it.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me today on the Global Business Report.
You're welcome.
Such a pleasure having you. You're watching the Global Business Report here on Arise News. It's time now for another short break.